The Nyoka Hotel stood far north of Zanzibar's old town, near the ruins of Stone Town, not far from the ocean. Its front veranda offered a direct view of the Indian Ocean, which at night seemed to turn into a mirrored mass filled with mystery. The building was an abandoned colonial structure that had sat empty for decades, recently renovated by a South African family interested in developing cultural and historical tourism. Everything had been done with extreme care. They respected the hotel's original foundations, preserved the old well in the back, and even kept a hand-carved 19th century door that led to the tea room. In this new phase, the place attracted visitors precisely because of its sense of the past, its restored yet decaying charm, and the mystical atmosphere that lingered in the air, with gentle, salt-laden breezes and local legends whispered in Swahili by elderly fishermen. During the first few months, everything went smoothly. Guests enjoyed the African experience they had dreamed of. Breakfasts with tropical fruit on the veranda, trips to spice farms, and visits to the abandoned areas of the old city. The local staff consisted of residents proud to share their culture and history. The hotel manager, Robin, an Englishman who had lived in Dar es Salaam for 15 years, ran everything with precision and kindness. No one expected, even for a moment, that the hotel would become the epicenter of what would later be known as the enigma of the Zanzibar ghost. It was on a gray Wednesday in September that a French couple, Adele and Maurice, checked into Suite 14, one of the upstairs rooms with a partial ocean view. Their routine was simple: morning walks, afternoon rest, and dinner at the ground floor restaurant. That night, however, as they tried to sleep, Adele heard something strange, a whisper coming from the window, which she first attributed to the wind or perhaps a child downstairs playing late at night. "Did you hear that?" she asked Maurice, who was already half asleep. "Hear what?" "No, love. It must be the wind." But Adele was certain it wasn't the wind. The whisper seemed to have shape. It sounded like words, though indistinct. When she moved closer to the window, the curtain shifted on its own, as if something had passed through it and turned toward the door. She saw nothing, but felt an icy chill run down her spine. In the days that followed, other guests began reporting similar episodes, always at night. Movement in rooms when no one was inside, voices murmuring in forgotten languages, fleeting figures caught in peripheral vision. The housekeeper, Asha, swore that every morning she found the large red armchair in the tea room turned backward, even though she was certain she locked up every night with everything in order. Manager Robin tried to rationalize it. He said it was collective stress, perhaps the influence of local stories, or some form of culturally induced hysteria. But then a video surfaced, recorded by a Dutch tourist, while filming the hotel's corridors for an architecture vlog. A translucent female figure, wrapped in white cloth, passed quickly and silently at the far end of the hallway. The video went viral worldwide on occult forums, bringing unwanted attention to the hotel. Locals called the figure Machawe ya Majini, the witch of the water spirits. According to ancient stories, confirmed by Anwar, the village's old fisherman, the legend said that during colonial times, a woman named Sharifa had been executed there for trading knowledge with ancestral forces of the ocean. It was said she learned immortality, but paid a terrible price. She became trapped between worlds, wandering the places where she had been betrayed. Robin decided to pretend it was all part of the marketing. Capitalizing on the video's fame, he reluctantly organized nighttime guided tours of the hotel, walking visitors through the corridors and telling the legends. But something changed after that. The energy of the place darkened. The thin line between performance and real horror slowly began to dissolve. One night, 4 Swedish teenagers stepped onto the veranda to take photos and ended up locked inside the portrait room for exactly 3 hours, even though all the hotel's keys were in Robin's possession. When they finally got out, they spoke of a veiled figure watching them from the ceiling, upside down. The video they managed to record in the dark showed only distorted shadows and a deep laugh in an ancient African language. That same weekend, Adele, the French woman, disappeared. Maurice said she left the room after hearing the whispers again, saying she needed to see who was calling her. She never returned. The hotel's security cameras stopped working for 17 minutes, exactly the interval between her departure and the moment her absence was noticed. Robin spiraled into despair. He contacted local authorities, who conducted thorough searches. As teams combed the area, more strange reports emerged. Sleepless guests claimed to see Sharifa's reflection walking across the moonlit water. Screams were heard coming from the well-preserved behind the hotel. One worker said he saw a trail of blood dripping down the walls of room 14, but when he returned with the manager, there was nothing there. The doorknob, however, was hot like burning coal. Employees began quitting one by one. The head chef, a local woman, left in a hurry after saying she had dreamed for 3 consecutive nights of Sharifa whispering in her ear. They promised not to return. You broke the pact. Robin no longer knew what was illusion, coincidence, or true supernatural reality. That was when Asha, the housekeeper, revealed something she had kept secret. She had found a diary hidden inside a hollow in the tea room wall. The diary, bound in aged leather, belonged to a German missionary responsible for evangelizing the region in the 19th century. It described encounters with a woman named Sharifa, who constantly warned about the danger of desecrating sacred water sites. One passage read, "The spring behind the hotel, that old well is the seal. It must never be opened, not even touched at dusk." Curiosity sealed everyone's fate. Obsessed, Robin decided to investigate the well with a small team. Filming everything for documentation, they descended at midnight, with flashlights and cameras. It was a stone shaft about 10 feet deep, apparently dry. But when they removed the century-old lid, a circular slab engraved with Swahili inscriptions and tribal symbols, they discovered something below. Not water, but a stone chamber covered in markings. That night, Robin and his team vanished. The cameras they carried were found floating in the ocean 2 days later, with no sign of their operators. The footage is the only clue. First, a normal recording of the group examining the site. Then flickering lights, a wind that should not have existed inside a well. And finally, a disturbing image. Sharifa's figure slowly emerging from the shadows, her face covered in scales, white eyes, and a mouth murmuring words that seemed to tear through the fabric of reality. Today, the Nuka Hotel remains closed, sealed by government order, and declared a spiritual heritage site by the local Ministry of Culture. Adele's name was never found in civil records, as if she had never existed. Robin and his team were declared missing at sea, even though ocean currents could never explain how the cameras returned in perfect condition. Residents avoid the place. A new pact has formed among the tribes. Sharifa's name must not be spoken aloud after sunset, and anyone who hears her call has only one night to refuse it. If they answer, she takes something in return: a memory, a soul, a name. Many ghost hunters have tried to solve the mystery. None have returned. The last video, filmed by an American YouTuber before he disappeared, shows, in its final second, the veranda of room 14. The door opens by itself. The curtains billow against the sea wind, and for a fraction of a second, a reflection appears in the mirror. Sharifa, smiling, eyes filled with darkness, waiting for the next guest. Perhaps something was sealed there for a good reason. Perhaps the hotel should never have been reopened. But the truth is, it is still there, frozen in time, waiting. The mystery of Zanzibar remains alive, and the whispers still echo through the walls when the tide rises. Would you dare spend a night in room 14? So tell me, did you hear that just now? No? Listen again. Maybe Sharifa is closer than you think. If you enjoyed this disturbing story, subscribe for more terrifying tales from every corner of the world. And remember, some legends aren't just stories, they are warnings. The sun burned high in the African savanna sky as the small village of Mbala began another ordinary day. Dust rose with the villagers' footsteps, spreading between mud and thatch huts and tinting the air with a hazy golden glow. It was a village forgotten by maps, where time itself seemed to have stopped. Children chased improvised balls made of rags. Men sharpened their tools for the day's work, while women headed toward the river to wash clothes and collect water. The elders sat beneath the great baobab tree at the center of the village, telling ancient stories that were both legends and warnings. Among those legends was one that was not always told, a story reserved for the darkest nights, when the fire crackled louder and the winds howled like spirits crossing the land of the living. It spoke of the Mumlambo, the so-called black serpent of the gods, a creature the elders said lived between worlds, neither fully physical nor fully spiritual, a being of punishment and warning, but also of desire and corruption. Village life kept its distance from such tales, until the day a group of young people decided to challenge the limits. Folly, the oldest among them at 19, led the others with brave words and a mocking smile. They were bored, and on the outskirts of the village stood a cursed hill known as Yukufa Hill. It was a place everyone avoided, covered in twisted bushes and eternal shadows, even under the blazing sun. It was there, people said, that the Mumlambo had last been seen many years ago, before the last season of terrible rains. Are you scared of children's stories? Fali sneered, his eyes shining with adrenaline as he held his machete, not for defense, but as a symbol of power. Let's not be stupid, Fali. My grandfather said people disappeared there. Duma murmured, hesitant. That was centuries ago, Duma. What if we film it? Think about the money and fame when we prove it's just an old hill like any other. And so they went. 5 youths, 3 boys and 2 girls, with flashlights, cell phones, and racing hearts climbed the hill at dusk. The silence wrapped around them with every step. Animals that should have been heard, crickets, birds, the occasional distant roar, were mute. Everything felt dense, like an invisible force field, draining joy and replacing it with a cold knot in the stomach. For the first half hour, there was only the snapping of branches and their restrained laughter. They filmed the surroundings, joked with the shadows, until they heard a wet, dragging sound coming from a small clearing ahead. A breath, or perhaps a deep hiss carried by the wind. The flashlights trembled in their hands as everyone froze. Did you hear that? Whispered Uma, the calmest of the group, now wide-eyed. Probably a wild boar or a snake, Fali said, trying to hide the fear tightening in his chest. A snake that breathes like that. They moved forward almost unconsciously, as if pushed by something they didn't understand. Something was calling them. The clearing revealed a massive stone covered in ancient carvings, small incisions forming spirals and tribal symbols none of them recognized. At the top of the stone lay a snake skin, black as charcoal, with green, oil-like reflections, and far too large to belong to any ordinary reptile. A heavy silence fell over them. Then Duma touched the stone. In that instant, the flashlights went out, the phones froze, and the forest around them seemed to hold its breath. Their return to the village that night was hurried and silent. None of them wanted to speak about what they had seen, though all of them felt that something followed them through the darkness. In the days that followed, Duma disappeared without a trace. The village mobilized hunters. The shaman was consulted. Nothing. No one heard, saw, or felt when he vanished. The only thing found was his necklace, coiled like a serpent at the entrance to the hill. Things began to change. Domestic animals were found dead at dawn. their bodies dried out like old leather, eyes hollow. A small girl said she had seen a crawling shadow entering Duma's mother's house. Overnight, Fali fell ill, yellowed eyes, his body covered in sores, nightmares in which he claimed to be swallowed by something vast and cold. One night, he woke up screaming, "She got into my eyes. She's here. I can't get out." An elder named Nkosi, respected and feared for his arcane knowledge, was called. After listening to Fali rant and watching him draw, using his own blood, the same symbols found on the stone, Nkosi fell silent for a long moment before speaking to the villagers gathered beneath the baobab. "You did not awaken her. You were chosen." "Chosen for what, Nkosi?" Fali's mother asked through tears. The old man did not answer. That night, the moon turned red, and the wind carried a nauseating stench of rot. People began to see the shadow, a long, eyeless, crawling thing, visible only from the corner of the eye. The serpent, the elders said, was the physical form of human greed and guilt. It came when balance was broken, when respect for the forces of nature was lost, but never before had it been so active. One dawn, flames consumed half the village. The serpent was finally seen, or so says what remains of Uma's testimony, before she disappeared weeks later. According to her, the black mamba did not slither like an ordinary snake. It floated inches above the ground, its thick, scaled body pulsing as if souls were trapped inside it. It had no eyes, but where they should have been were swirling black voids that drained the sanity of anyone who stared into them. I saw Duma. He was inside it. He looked at me, begging for help. He was smiling, but his eyes were crying. Uma whispered before slipping into a catatonic state. Nkosi prepared a ritual. It was said to be the only way to seal the creature between worlds again. A sacrifice. A volunteer had to enter the hill and offer themselves with blood and repentance. When Fali heard this, he rose from the bed, where he was already near death, and with dry eyes, said only, "It was my fault." Dressed in ritual robes, he climbed the hill on his own. They say he did not scream, but the entire forest trembled when he entered the clearing. A green light exploded among the trees, and then, silence. The serpent vanished. The village breathed again, for a while. Today, 20 years later, records of the story exist in old archives, belonging to an NGO that once passed through the region. VHS tapes with distorted audio and shaky images. But what chills people most is that among the trees, drone cameras have captured a shadow, a black trail moving against the wind. Along the riverbanks, villagers say the fish have disappeared. The soil has dried again. Children have started having nightmares once more. And so the question remains, was the black mamba merely a physical ancient creature, a survivor of a forgotten lineage of the world? Or was it the materialization of human darkness itself, of guilt, transgression, and hunger for power? The village of Mambo still exists, but little is said about it. The young do not believe. The old simply lower their eyes and whisper, "She sleeps, but she dreams, and one day she will return." Would you dare climb Yukufa Hill? Perhaps she is still waiting. In a remote and vast region of Zimbabwe, surrounded by rolling hills and dense vegetation, lies Gokwe, an old settlement marked by stories buried beneath dry, dusty soil. Life in Gokwe has followed the same rhythm for decades. It begins at dawn with the crowing of roosters, continues with the calloused hands of farmers plowing the red earth, and ends with families gathered around the fire, sharing simple food and conversations about the day that has passed. There is no rush there, no chaos, only the whisper of the wind through the mopane trees and the nighttime chorus of crickets and frogs, sounds that guide the people into sleep. For many years, Chiduku Farm was the largest, most prosperous, and most respected in the Gokwe region. Its owner, Tinashi Chiduku, inherited the land from his grandfather, a respected man who claimed to speak with the spirits of the land. Tinashi, however, was a modern man, educated in the capital city of Harar, and paid no attention to local superstitions. He returned to Gokwe after his parents died in a car accident in the city, determined to turn the traditional farm into a profitable cotton and corn business. He modernized the equipment, expanded the fields using machinery, and hired workers from outside the area, moves that caused discomfort within the local community, especially among the elders, who saw the rejection of tradition as a sign of disrespect toward the ancestors. The routine was meticulously organized. Workers woke to the sound of a bell hanging on the farmhouse porch, a deep, resonant chime that echoed across the fields. Children from the nearby village ran past on their way to an improvised school, and the local market opened space for the exchange of goods and news. Sunlight painted the tin roofs amber, while distant drums marked special events such as births and weddings. Everything seemed under control. Tina Shi believed he had finally tamed the rebellious land of his ancestors, until the day the crops began to rot. At first, the losses were blamed on common infestations or climate fluctuations, but soon the fields began to smell of decay, even though no pests were visible. The animals, once healthy, refused to approach certain areas of the land, and howled at nothing as night fell. Still skeptical, Tina Shi believed his workers were sabotaging the crops. He fired 2 of them, and forbade any mention of witchcraft. Then the porch bell began to ring on its own. At first, just once at dusk, then more frequently. Each chime was followed by an incident: calves found dead in the well, scarecrows appearing in different locations, and a thick fog forming around a forbidden clearing, an area where in the past it was said ancient rituals had taken place. "You need to stop this," said Rudo, Tina Shi's wife, one night, her voice trembling as she watched the silhouette of someone standing in the cornfield through the window. "This project, this land is dying from the inside out." Tina Shi frowned. "Now you're going to talk like the village elders too? Spirits, fog, hauntings." "Rudo, all of this has explanations. We'll bring in soil specialists, biologists, whatever it takes." But Rudo hesitated before replying. "Maybe you need a Nanga, a healer, at least to listen to what the land is trying to say." Tina Shi refused vehemently. But that very night, something happened that would change his view forever. When he went out to check a noise coming from the barn, he saw a hunched figure with its back turned, rummaging through the corn. He grabbed a flashlight and shone it on the figure, and then the kernels began to move on their own, as if breathing, swallowing the figure in a reverse flow. And instead of blood, words written with crushed corn ran across the barn walls: "Do not disturb those who sleep." Still in shock, Tina Shi began to reconsider the warnings of his wife and the elders. He searched through farm archives, old records, anything that might reveal a pattern. Hidden in a wooden box in the attic, he found several journals written by his grandfather. In one of them, he read, "We buried the last container in the clearing. 3 days of fasting, and the spirit calmed. But they always return when we forget." He sought out the elder Mafudzi, respected by everyone in the village, as one of the few who still maintained contact with the region's spiritual guides. A man with clouded eyes, a deep voice, and slow steps. He stared at Tina Shi and said, "The clearing was sacred. It was a bridge between worlds. You planted there, built there. You spilled ox blood where dancers were meant to tread. Now the shadows are claiming their share. But is there anything I can do?" Tina Shi asked, clenching his hands tightly. "Maybe," Mafudzi replied. "The bones can be returned, but the spirit of the land is wounded now. It has realized it is no longer feared, and that which is set free without fear does not return to the caves." The events intensified. Workers began to disappear without a trace. Only empty clothes left in the fields, or broken tools driven into the soil like stakes. The nights grew longer, and the moon turned an unnatural red. The trees along the edge of the clearing died, and at its center, without explanation, a twisted trunk rose from the ground. One day, Rudo vanished, Tina Shi saw her at the far end of the cornfield, standing motionless. He shouted and ran toward her, but when he reached the spot, he found only her scarf caught on an ear of corn. Rudo's return, or at least what looked like her, came the following dawn. He heard footsteps in the bedroom, and saw her leaning against the door, hair covering her face, her body trembling, as if soaked. When she lifted her head, she had no eyes. "Why didn't you listen to me?" murmured a thick voice that seemed to come from inside the wall. Tina Shi fled the house, and along the way he saw all the scarecrows in the fields, slowly turning to face him. The farm now exuded something dark, almost viscous, like spiritual decay. He tried to set the place on fire, but the rain came before the match could even light. A black rain that smelled of sulfur and blood-soaked earth. The only way out he could find was to dig where his grandfather said he had buried the last container. There, he found ceremonial artifacts, bones in baskets, and a skull painted with red pigment. When he touched it, he collapsed and had visions of dancers in trance, with white eyes and drums pounding inside his head. Voices screamed in a language he had never learned to speak, yet somehow understood. When he woke up, he was in the clearing. It was night. Lantern flames floated all around. Ahead of him, dozens of figures chanted. One of them, with skin marked by tribal scars, placed a hand on his chest and blew a dark powder onto his face. And then, everything stopped. The next morning, the farm was silent. No wind, no animals, no life, but also no hauntings. Tina Shi walked out to the porch. The bell, for the first time in months, was still. He sighed, unsure whether it had been an exorcism or a truce. He left the farm without looking back, abandoned production, transferred the land title to the community, and swore never to return. Years later, rumors spread through Gakwe about new crops flourishing there without any apparent cause. No one planted, no one harvested. But at night, people saw human silhouettes among the stalks. Some danced, others merely watched, silently. And those who dare to cross the clearing, even today, hear the sound of distant drums and feel their bodies grow heavier than they should, as if the earth never wants to let them go. The curse of Gakwe Farm may have been silenced, but it was never ended. Ancient spirits are not buried. They wait, hungry, for those who forget them.